Live from an Omaha hotel room, this is another edition of Baseball Without Borders, the podcast from the World Baseball Network. I'm Leif Skodnick, joined by Alfred. Don't call him Albert Ezman. He's in Knoxville, Tennessee. I'm at the College World Series where it was Media Day today. Very interesting day. All 8 teams getting some time on the field, all 8 coaches and some players doing press conference appearances. And, you know, Alfred, we've gone through the entirety of the college baseball season now. This is one of the most surprising fields, I think, ever to come to Omaha for the College World Series. For the first time since 1957, there are 8 teams here, and none of them were here last year. LSU, of course, was here 2 years ago. They won the national championship. I saw Cade Galoso getting wheeled around on a cart after he broke his ankle. He had a walking boot, a cigar in his hand to go out and take a photo at the statue outside. But, you know, 8 new teams this year and some kind of surprising teams as well. What are your thoughts on this field that has made it through the Super Regional to Omaha?
Yeah, I think it's just kind of the perfect group that's, embodied surviving the chaos. And there's been some chaos this NCAA tournament if you paid attention. I mean, we're going to get into Murray State. Murray State's like the 4th 4-seed ever to make it. In 4 seeds, there's been some 4 seeds that have fared decently well. I know Fresno State was a long time ago at this point, but they won the national title as the 4 seed. I don't think this Murray team maybe has the capabilities to do that, but it's a surprise they're here. You have Coastal, another mid-major, coming in and making this kind of run, and then you have your powerhouses like LSU and Arkansas, who finally is getting back to Omaha and looking for that elusive first national championship. To me, though, overall, it's just, teams that have survived this chaotic, really unpredictable tournament. Because I'll tell you what, my Omaha 8, at least at the start of the tournament, is nowhere near what this one is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody could have picked, outside of LSU and Arkansas, it's really hard to have picked these 8 teams. So you mentioned Coastal Carolina. They're playing in the opening game tomorrow. They're coming in on a 23-game win streak. Now, here's the thing. They play in the Sun Belt. The Sun Belt is not a power conference. They sometimes get more than one team in. What do you make of the 23-game win streak that they're riding? Because a lot of that is conference play, but then they rode that through the regional and through the super regional. Now it's at 23 games, and, maybe they only need to win 5 more to get a national championship.
They've done it before, and Mr. Gilmore, who is the coach of that team, is still around the program, obviously. Kevin Schnall.
He's here in Omaha.
Yeah, I saw he was there. Kevin Schnall was on that staff for that team that won it all, and he's the head coach now. It's the same kind of culture to that team. To me, Life, it started with pitching, and it's progressed with pitching. They're one of the best pitching teams in the country. You have Jacob Morrison, who was Sun Belt Pitcher of the Year. He has been fabulous on the mound. Hayden Johnson was really good for them in the Auburn Super Regional. It's a team, and they played an Auburn team who has a really talented lineup full of these young freshmen who are going to be around next year and make them just as good. I think they can hang. They can really hang with this field. Now, I think they're a good sleeper pick for a national champion if you were to choose one outside of these big teams, simply because they've done this before. They have the pitching that can match with some of these big lineups. It just comes down to their hitting, and you really don't have any problems with it on a 23-game winning streak. It's gotten you this far. So I love the mojo they have. They're in, I think, the more favorable double elimination side where, they avoid for now like an LSU or Arkansas. So it helps them out a ton. And we'll see where it goes. I like them a ton heading into this field here in Omaha, and I think they can thrive and win at least a couple games.
Yeah, one of the things Kevin Schnall said today in the press conference is, when your pitching staff is allowing 4 or fewer runs a game, that gives you a really good chance to win. And it's like, okay, you hear that. It's like, well, of course, that's true. But they've really been doing that. Over the past 23 games, their team ERA is something like 2.4. So, I mean, you just don't get pitching like that in college in general. One of the things that I tell people about college baseball all the time is that, look, every team has 5 guys that are good college pitchers, but you live and die with the other 8, 9 pitchers that you have to bring in when those guys are not on the mound. Obviously, Coastal's been getting pitching, but look at the team they're going to face, Arizona. Arizona wins the Big 12 tournament. They won the Pac-12 last year. They're the final Pac-12 champion in any sport, believe it or not. I don't know if you knew that fact, and I was there for it. But, I listened to Chip Hale talk, and this is a guy that has done just about everything in baseball. From he's played in the major leagues, he played in the College World Series, he's coached in the major leagues, he's managed in the major leagues, he won a World Series in the major leagues. He, in fact, managed the Nationals to a win in Game 6 of the World Series in 2018 after Dave Martinez got ejected. That got them to Game 7 where they won the World Series. He doesn't have a ton of stuff left to do, but as an Arizona alum who played for this program twice in the College World Series, 1985 and 1986, I think it would mean a whole lot to him if they could pull it out this week. How do you think they match up with Coastal?
I think, the key is going to be what kind of pitching they get. Again, I continue to harp on the pitching sort of side of things, but with Coastal, I think that's just the name of the game with what they have. And if you look at, the guys kind of Arizona has, Owen Kramkowski has been one of their top starters. ERA at 5.48, again, in college baseball, to me, that it's kind of tricky because there's just obviously a lot more runs scored in college baseball, especially in this day and age. So, to me, you'll take a 5.48 really most of the time. He's been good with striking out guys for the most part, 83 and 87 innings. It's just going to be if they can match that. They got a great guy on the back end in Tony Pluta, who's really good at closing out these games. You can't pick against them, even in these games. In this upcoming game against Coastal, you saw the North Carolina Super Regional. They got clobbered in that first game, 18-2, and then they just stormed back and win the last 2 games in Chapel Hill. And that's tough for a team to go from Tucson all the way across the country and do that. I'm sorry if you're an Arizona fan and you were there. I can't imagine they had a lot of people there other than maybe their parents, you know what I mean, watching those games. So you didn't really have you didn't have the crowd with you, and you're able to fight back into it. You can't pick against them. I think it just comes down to if their pitching holds up. And again, I think Tony Pluta is really key for them just because of how good he's been closing out some of these games.
Yeah, and Pluta got the final out in Game 3 of the Super Regional at North Carolina. You come in those big moments and you really can build up some confidence, and I think he definitely did that. He talked about that a little bit today. Really 5.48 ERA, not a great number, but college baseball isn't pro baseball. There's a lot of guys that can hit, and there's a lot of guys that can pitch, but the bats in college baseball kind of negate whatever advantage pitchers might have. So it's always interesting to see how pitchers are going to perform. Now, on to tomorrow night's game, Oregon State has had one of the more interesting seasons that a college baseball team has ever had to have because they're a team without a conference. They've played about 2/3 of their schedule either on the road or at a neutral site. They've not had, they didn't have a conference tournament to play. When they had a conference tournament, what Mitch Canham did, he had the team play an intra-squad scrimmage for the community, and then they watched the Sandlot on the video board at the ballpark. And I think that's a great way to make lemonade out of the lemons that the dissolution of the Pac-12 gave them. But at the same time, and look, they earned their way here. They won the regional. They won the super regional. They hosted both of them. They were high enough in the RPI to get a national seed. But they did not play as tough a schedule as they did last year. I don't think that you should necessarily fault them for that because some of that is beyond their control. But how do you think that that's going to play into tomorrow night's game against Louisville?
I don't really think a ton. I don't know if it's crazy for me to say that. I mean, they played Florida State. They beat Florida State in the Super Regional. Florida State was as good of a team as you'd find this year. And they, were tested in that. Obviously, Florida State kind of shut them down and was able to get a 3-1 win in that middle second game of that Super Regional to tie things up and send it to a third. And then their offense exploded, right for 14 runs. And that's, comes from guys they have like Ava Arquette, Gavin Turley, who have been at the top of that lineup performing all year long. That's been the nick that everyone has had with this team, I think, is, they played Oregon, USC, and then UCLA, and then it was just like a Big West, you know what I mean, bonanza for them, really conference schedule-wise in quotes. So at this point, though, you've gotten this far to where you're in a position to win the national championship. This is a program that's done it before. They're honestly one of the best programs you'd find in the country. You have the really good pitching up front with Dax Whitney and Kleinschmidt, who will give you good starts pretty much most of the time. And I've been really impressed with Whitney as a freshman. Phenom out of Blackfoot, Idaho, really putting things together his freshman season. And to me, it's kind of like what I said with Coastal. They are in that kind of, I don't want to call it weaker because that's offensive, but they're in the side without the LSUs and Arkansas, where really it's kind of anyone's game as to get into that championship series. And they're in that position. They are facing a good Louisville team, who we'll talk about in a sec, who I saw and was really impressed with their lineup top to bottom with the different number of guys that came up big. But to me, Oregon State has the top-notch talent to be able to contend with the rest of this field.
Yeah, and they're going to face a Louisville team that is, they hit and they're fast, and they don't miss an opportunity to run. So, one of the things that Dan McDonald talked about today, is that this is a team that, they've got a good culture, they work hard, but they also seem to be a team that takes advantage of any opportunity that they're given. Canham, for his part, talked about how playing a team like Louisville, pitchers have to be faster to the plate. Catchers have to be ready to be getting that ball to second as fast as possible. Like a 1.35 pitcher move to the plate, meaning 1.35 seconds from the pitcher starting his motion to the ball in the glove. That could be a stolen base now because there's so much speed. You look at a guy like Eddie King. This is a guy that can hit for power. He's got tons of speed. If he hits a ball to the gap in the very expansive outfield at Charles Schwab, he's going to be dangerous. What are your thoughts on Louisville and how they match up with Oregon State?
It starts there, right? The stolen bases and the quick factor that they have, and it comes from a bunch of different players on this roster. I mean, you look down the list, guys with stolen bases in double figures. Kamanu Neighbors is one with 13. You got Alex Alitzia with 30. Zion Rose is 30. Lucas Moore, 51 stolen bases this year. That's just incredible. And it can come, the potent moments can come from different guys. Jake Monroe was one player who I was really impressed with in their Miami Super Regional. Came up, was huge in that first game for them, really carried them, the distance, so to speak, with the way he was able to get runs off home runs, just base hits, whatever you call it. And then their pitching has been really, really fabulous. I know McDonald was really impressed with some of the freshmen they have in the rotation. Patrick Forbes, I feel like, is really the front-lining name to it. He's the one who will come out first against this Oregon State team unless something else happens, and will try to deliver to the best of his ability. He's been doing it all year, and to me, this is a team. I don't know if he talked about this with you, Leif, but they had felt disrespected because it had been a while since they'd gotten to Omaha. They had some rocky seasons in between 2019 when they last went and now, and people were starting to doubt the kind of direction they were taking, especially in this new NIL day and age with how things were going. And he said that put a chip on this team's shoulder, and it's gotten them there. So they're going to come in here motivated. I asked him, what's the difference between, a deep Omaha run and the runs they've had? He said it's that kind of chip they have. So I'd watch out for that. But in the end, when it comes to this matchup, that speed is going to be a huge factor. I mean, you just heard the stolen base numbers, and it pops off the page. Especially Lucas Moore, man, 50 stolen bases is just insane. I don't know. I don't think there's a single guy I've seen, at least since I've been watching college baseball, that's done that.
Yeah, I mean that's like a Ricky Henderson, Vince Coleman speed kind of stolen base number for a college baseball season where you only play 55, 60 games tops.
Hmm.
51 stolen bases is pretty incredible. Let's look at Saturday's slate. UCLA back here for the first time in over a decade, and they're playing Murray State. Let's talk about UCLA first because there's plenty to say about Murray State. UCLA is not a team that I'm particularly familiar with. I'm an East Coast guy, um, but they're back here and they clearly have a strong team. They've had some adversity too. They were evicted from their ballpark in the fall. Their head coach was talking today about John Savage was talking about how they were practicing at high school fields. They were practicing at an intramural field. They set up a makeshift clubhouse in the athletic facilities. Um, you know, as Joe Girardi, who I covered a bit when he was managing the New York Yankees, was so fond of saying, it's not what you want. But nonetheless, UCLA has, you know, made the best of a bad situation, and here they are. What are your thoughts on UCLA this year?
You put it perfectly. I mean, you talked about it last year too. This team, I would say, underperformed a good bit for what UCLA baseball is capable of. And they're, how do you do that? How do you come back from that? You go to the College World Series, and that's where they are. They have yet to lose an NCAA tournament game. Maybe it's because of the teams they've played, but also you got to look at how they've played these teams, and they've done very well, and it's come in different ways. I mean, 19 runs against Fresno State, followed up by 11 against Arizona State in the regional. You kind of shut down UTSA, who is a very nifty, tricky team with Pat Hallmark, who like to, small ball their way to beat these big schools. They take them down in the super regional, and here they are, competing for a national championship. It starts, of course, a lot of people felt this guy got snubbed of Golden Spikes nominations, but Rock Chalowski is going to be the big name on this team. Phenomenal player. There's people giving him comparisons to what Brandon Crawford kind of looks like as a Major League Baseball reference. I saw that in social media today. He's going to be the name at least Murray State has circled initially, and I'm sure every other team that plays them will have circled. It starts with him and really kind of ends with his play, and it's gotten UCLA to this point. But as this is a team, as hot as these other teams are, UCLA has yet to lose an NCAA tournament game. They've kind of just, cruised their way here convincingly with some great pitching performances mixed with big offensive outputs.
Yeah, one of the things John Savage talked about today was Rock Chalowski's love for playing defense and compared it to that of Brandon Crawford. 2 years ago I was at the Mexico City series where the Giants played the San Diego Padres at Estadio Alfredo Abreu. And I got to talk to Brandon Crawford at length. We were talking about the speed of the turf in the ballpark there. He's a guy that just loves, he like me, when I played middle infield, I could not take enough grounders. I always wanted more. Same kind of guy, and I get the impression from John Savage that Rock Chalowski, same kind of guy as Brandon Crawford in that regard. Now, the other dugout is the team that everybody is just blown away by, the Murray State Racers. And, one of the things that Savage said today is they're not a Cinderella. Look at the teams that they've beaten. They beat Ole Miss twice at the Ole Miss Regional. And if you've ever been to Swayze Field at Oxford University Stadium, you know that it's a tough place to play. I've been to a few games there. I think that Murray State has a humble little ballpark. Another reporter that I know that's here stopped. Talk about crazy. He drove from the East Coast to Omaha. Not something I personally ever plan on doing, not while American Airlines has a direct flight from LaGuardia. But he drove and he made the point of stopping in Murray, Kentucky to see Johnny Regan Field, the home ballpark of the Racers, which seats about 800. There have been some photos that circulated on social media that show how small it is, and I don't want to run down Murray State's athletic program at all because I have a friend that played both baseball and football there, a dear friend of mine from law school. But the photos that you've seen on social media are filtered a little bit, and they make it look a little better than it actually is. This is a ballpark that could use some new outfield wall padding. Some of the padding is starting to come apart. The scoreboard's a little bit sun faded. The grass needs a little bit of help. And they still have a crushed shale warning track, which you don't see too often anymore. But, here's this team that they were a 4 seed. No one was picking them to win a game at the Oxford Regional. And they won the Regional, and then they went to Duke. They beat Duke, and here they are in Omaha for the first time in program history. They haven't been in the NCAA tournament in 22 years. One of the things that I think really struck me today was, one, that John Savage emphasized that you have to take this team seriously because of who they've beaten to get here. And he's absolutely right about that. But number two, Dan Skirka is a name we are going to hear more from in college baseball, whether it's coaching at Murray State or coaching elsewhere. Because this is a guy who made it clear through what he said at the press conference today that he understands that it's not just about winning and losing baseball games. It's about winning life. It's about developing leaders and teammates that are going to go on to do big things, whether it's in baseball or whatever they go on to do. So, that alone struck me as this team has a culture that may bend, but it won't break. There's a lot of cast-offs on this team. There are guys that have transferred more than once. Jonathan Hogart, who has 22 home runs this year, Skirka recruited him 3 times. They recruited him out of high school. They recruited him out of JUCO. They didn't get him either time. Then they recruited him out of the transfer portal, and they got him. And he's hit 36 home runs in 2 years for Murray State. What do you think about Murray State, not just being here, but what's their potential here? I mean, they've already won by being here, but I think they have more winning to do.
Yeah, I mean, the sky's the limit, it seems, for this team at this point. You look at who they beat. They had to play Ole Miss 3 times in that regional because they beat Georgia Tech, who was very PO'd, right, about their tournament seeding and what happened with them. Then they had to play Ole Miss again. They lost to them. And then they beat Ole Miss the 3rd time they played to eventually move on. And even Duke tested them, and they're battle-tested through that. How did they respond from a loss in the first game of that Super? They bounced back and explode for 19 runs against the Blue Devils in that second game in a place where Duke had never hosted an NCAA tournament game before that Super Regional. That was the first time Duke hosted, so they were psyched out of their mind for that, all their fans. And they go into that environment that was probably not exactly the best, considering going on the road and whatnot. And they put up that scoring burst. I mean, nothing. You can't really sit here and be like, well, Murray State's just going to fold over once they get here, because there's a chance they just don't. And UCLA, John Savage talked about it, you said, is going to have his team on their toes for this upcoming first game. And, obviously Hogart's been great with the power, but they have other guys in double figures with home runs as well, with Dan Talkin, Carcer Gardner, Will Veerling, as well. Will Veerling, has bounced around and hit the transfer portal some as well. So this is a team that's, house money, right? And house money teams tend to be dangerous. You kind of alluded to it. I like where they are, what they've been doing, because they have been tested, and they've been the chaos bringers, really, of this NCAA tournament. So who knows where this team will go? Winning a national championship for them is just, we've seen it. We've seen a 4 seed do it. I mentioned Fresno State at the beginning. Maybe that could be the case. It'll be tough, obviously, because we will get into the other matchup on this side of the double elimination bracket, and it has some big time teams in it. But you can't really doubt this team at this point based on who they've played and the amount of games they have played to get here and to gain that tournament experience that they haven't had in quite some time.
Yeah, and our colleague Alian Muhammad is going to be able to break out the Omaha acronym. He's a Mississippi State guy. And I don't know if you know what the acronym for Omaha is?
For them, it's tell me.
Ole Miss ain't here again.
Oh, there you go. I'm sure
But,
he's loving that. So,
oh yeah, undoubtedly. But he still did go to a cow college. So, um, but anyway, enough making fun of Mississippi State. They're not here either. One of the things that came up today in the state of college baseball press conference was the possibility of doing a reseeding when teams get to Omaha. And part of the reason that came up is because you have two SEC teams here that are very, very good in LSU, the number 3 national seed, and Arkansas, the number 6. And, pardon me, I have that reversed. LSU's the number 6 and Arkansas's number 3. And they're in the same bracket. So one of them is not potential. I mean, obviously, both of them might not make the final, but one of them is definitely not making the championship series. Arkansas has a terrific team this year. LSU has institutional knowledge. Granted, there's been some turnover since they were here 2 years ago. Won the national championship behind, Paul Skeens, who might win the Cy Young this year, despite playing for a team that probably the other 25 guys on the team are basically AAA players. But LSU has knowledge of this place. They know what it means to be here. They know what it takes to win here. How do you see this matchup shaking out?
oh, who knows, right? I mean, let's just start with that. The pitching is just going to be tremendous from both sides. For LSU, I'll start with them because I think it's arguably the best 1-2 punch in college baseball with Cade Anderson and then Anthony Ianson. I mean, those two, I don't know the exact number in front of me, but it's a combined 220-something strikeouts. And it may be more based on what they did in the Super Regional. So it's probably going to be Anderson, might be Ianson. Who knows what Jay Johnson will do with it. But it's going to be one of those guys, and that 1-2 thing is such a huge deal. It's a huge deal in a best 2 out of 3 when you're starting with those two, and it's a huge deal to get off on the right foot when you're in double elimination. So it's going to start with those two guys, but the lineup they're facing, Life, is just tremendous with Arkansas. And it's not just, obviously, Vahiva Aloy and Kohio Aloy take the cake, right, as the Aloy brothers and headlining that lineup. But Charles Davalon, fabulous hitter. Brent Iredale, fabulous hitter. Ryder Helfrich has been tremendous this tournament. So this is a dangerous lineup. There's a lot of people who, I think it was Mike Rooney who said this, or Mark Etheridge, one of those guys. Arkansas's best is the best we see in college baseball, and I think it's very true because of how complete they are. And usually this is a program with Arkansas who has top-end pitching, and it's just out of this world amazing. Might not be that level this year, but it's like right here, not that level this year. I mean, Zach Root is a great pitcher for them. Christian Fouch is about as good as you'll find. The fireman coming out of the bullpen is what they call him. And then you look, Will McIntyre has been with that program forever. He comes out of the bullpen and makes some starts on occasion to help them as well. This is power on power. I don't know which way it'll go. The key to it to me, though, is going to be Cade Anderson and or Anthony Ianson against this Arkansas lineup because, it's tremendous. And I think this is, speaking on Arkansas's behalf, it's as good of a shot Dave Van Horn has to get that first title as he's ever had because they're back in Omaha. They're really not, he's at the tail end, I'll call it, of his coaching career just based on age and how long he's been doing it. And they want him to have it. I think this team really wants him to get it. They're having fun. They're relaxed. They're loose. They ran into Tennessee in the Super Regional, the defending national champs, and really didn't bat an eye. I mean, the offense wasn't great that first game, but Zach Root and Gabe Gackle came in and shut down that lineup down. And then that second game, the offense just exploded on Liam Doyle, who I think is probably the best sole alone pitcher in college baseball. So, man, this is quite the matchup we have. I think it's going to come down to how well this LSU starting rotation does and those starting guys do, particularly Cade Anderson, against these Arkansas hitters.
All right, so without any further ado, I'm going to put you on the spot. Pick tomorrow's games. Who do you like? Arizona versus Coastal Carolina, Louisville versus Oregon State.
Ooh, all right, So Coastal Arizona, I'm going to roll with the Chanticleers, whatever you may call them, the Blue Chickens, the Teal Chickens. I'm rolling with those guys. I love the pitching they have. I think it, like I said, it contends with anybody. It can contend with Arizona, and I think it will get them, through at least this first game. Like I said, though, be careful. If Arizona is hanging with them towards the end of the game and Tony Pluta comes in, that's where things can go awry. But I do think Coastal gets it done just based on how good their starting pitching's been, and plus they've won 23 games in a row. I have a hard time picking against that as of right now. And then as for the other game, Oregon State and Louisville, I like Oregon State. I think you're going to get one of those top starters to start out to match up with Patrick Forbes. I think it's going to work out well for you. The key, again, like you said, is going to be how they deal with the speed and base stealing Louisville has. And I think that team will be on their toes enough to do it. I think you're going to see a big performance out of guys like Arquette and Turley. So first two games for me, I'm going to go Coastal Carolina and Oregon State.
And then on to Saturday. The early game, Murray State versus UCLA. The late game, LSU versus Arkansas. Who do you like?
The first game, I'm going to buy it for now. Give me the Murray State Racers. I really think they'll get a win there, at least to start this double elimination field. Again, it's a team playing with house money. They've been tested before. I would argue that no disrespect to UCLA, they've seen at least just as tough of teams as UCLA is in the NCAA tournament before that. They've played a ton of games. They have that experience. UCLA, although winning every game so far in the NCAA tournament is incredible, that's really what you want to do, right? I think the fact that Murray State has played a lot of these games and they have the guys that hit the ball long, far, and for power, I think it can carry them at least this first matchup against UCLA. And then as for the cap of all caps, I guess I'll call it, Arkansas and LSU, I like the Razorbacks. I think this team, has the mojo with the up and down hitting throughout the lineup to beat this LSU team. I think if it ends up being Cade Anderson, which I think it will, I think eventually they'll be able to crack him, and get him out of the game at some point or another, and they'll be able to carry it to a win. That's going to be a very close game, though. Don't get me wrong. But with that being said, I think Arkansas gets it done. And Leif, if you don't mind, I'm just going to spoil it. I do think the Arkansas Razorbacks end up winning this national championship.
You think they're going to go all the way? How many games will they? They're going to have to probably lose one somewhere along the way. Where would you pick them to lose a game?
I think it might be that championship series with whoever they see on the other side. I think maybe they might be riding high through their double elimination side of things. Once they get to that championship series, I think they might be juiced up to the point where whoever comes out on that side might be Coastal, might be Oregon State, one of the other teams I didn't name. They might jump and get them for a game. But I think, that's when they'll settle in and be like, don't panic. You just got to win these two. We've won all year. We have the lineup to do it. We have the team to do it. And then they'll settle in and cruise on to a national title. I do think, though, that championship series might be where they stumble just a bit before they win it all.
Well, it's been a long time since there was a two-game championship series here in Omaha. I think it goes back before the pandemic. Correct me if I'm wrong. 2018?
That sounds right. And that is not the year Arkansas fans want to hear, Leif. I'll tell you that right now. So
nope.
Hopefully that's not a sign of things to come. But in all seriousness, I do think they get it done this time.
Well, we'll see how it all shakes out. The first two games tomorrow, two more on Saturday, then elimination games coming Sunday and Monday. So we'll do this again sometime before the championship series, maybe Monday or Tuesday when the elimination games are starting to weed out the pretenders from the field. He's Alfred Ezman. Don't call him Albert, even though I almost just did again. I'm Leif Skodnick. This is Baseball Without Borders from the World Baseball Network. Until next time, smoke 'em inside.